with the Secretary General for the Kenya Red Cross Society, Dr. Ahmed Idris. And of course, we are going to field some of the questions that have been raised by our viewer here. You're watching a special coverage of the ongoing drought here in Kenya. We are looking at the preparedness and of course the impact it is having on the local communities. We have just watched a very harrowing situation that is unfolding in the counties of Wajir and Tana River counties. And you're from Garissa County, Dr. Idris. Its neighbors, Wajir to the north, if my map is fine. And it's quite disheartening when you look even at the school infrastructure in that area, and yet you expect the children there to compete with children in Nairobi, in Mombasa, in other areas. When you engage with the county leadership as Red Cross, and I'm talking about all the 23 ASAL counties, and when you listen to them about spending on priority areas, what do they say?
That's a very difficult question. Let's summarize it this way. First, we have a problem. We have a problem around whether we are allocating sufficient resources to address the root causes of the vulnerability around communities, as we said earlier. Let's agree that the vulnerability is not from the lack of rain, it is the other accumulated factors. Mm-hmm. If that is the case, then there is a serious question around whether the subnational entities, famously known as county governments, are putting their best foot forward. And that's a conversation that we ought to all have generally. But even as we do, we have to remember that the county governments are relatively young in terms of how many years they've been operating. Mm-hmm. In some of the counties, we are talking about situations, over 45 years of independence, extreme marginalization. We cannot expect that there will be a complete turnaround in 15 years since we adopted the new constitution. So there's also an expectation issue. But do we have concerns around whether resources are being used, allocated in the right way? All of us as Kenyans have these concerns and conversations that we ought to have. Mm-hmm. What disturbs me most is whether the resources we are allocating at a national level are sufficient to address some of the deeply built vulnerabilities that these communities are facing. And that's the discussion we were having around whether we are allocating sufficient resources for development work, whether between the formulas that we are using in resource allocation, we are allocating sufficient resources to the counties as a whole, and between the counties, whether we are allocating sufficient resources to those counties. Mm-hmm. An example is a county like Lamu. In terms of the range of risks that they face, the poverty levels, the insecurity, I've always asked myself the question on whether that budget that is allocated will do anything meaningful in terms of addressing that level. So there has to be a concerted effort between the work being done at the national level, the national government, and the work that is being done at the county level.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about ecological engineering, yeah, which is now taking roots in the global, on the global stage. And we were, let's take, for example, the case of China. And when you look at the desert, one of the driest deserts in the world is Taklamakan. They've managed to plant billions of trees, reversing ecological degradation to a point whereby that region now, has more trees, and because of these, they are receiving a lot of rains, and because of the rains, they are now managing to plant a lot of food. When you look at the 23 ASAL counties in Kenya, is it possible for us, or is it possible to undertake an ecological engineering where we become more purposeful, more dedicated, more committed in planting trees and doing afforestation?
It's not just possible, it's something that we must do. I think ecological engineering and the entire conversation around it is simply having an honest discussion that years of human interaction with nature has caused such serious negative impact that we have a role to play to reverse that. We have to have a positive interaction with nature. We have to have an interaction that is sustainable, and that is something that we must do. In many of these counties where we come from, if you just look a few years back, some of these areas were dry, but they were not as dry as they are now. Some of these areas don't have trees. The impact is from years of cutting down trees, making charcoal, using firewood, just human impact, negative impact on the environment. So even as we blame, developed countries for climate change, we have to have our own discussion at local level on how we are interacting with nature, whether it is a sustainable level of interaction, whether our children and their children will benefit from what nature offers.
Very well.
And that's a conversation that we have to have.
Very good. And of course, it requires us to look at the man in the mirror. As we wind up this conversation, I want to hear this from you. The next drought is as sure as death. We know it's going to come. We don't know. Maybe 1 year from now, 2 years or 3 years. In a minute from now, I want to hear from you. What do we need to do so that we do not see the kind of images that are coming from Wajir, Tana River, and all the other counties?
Look, I think we have to invest in community resilience. We have to invest in the ability of the communities to withstand these shocks. And that requires a certain level of investment in their livelihoods, diversify their livelihoods. We have to invest in proper development projects that not only capture water but are used for food production. So we have to be very purposive around building the capacity of the communities to withstand the shocks. As long as our policy planning mechanism assumes that communities will survive on their own, then every drought will continue to have this kind of impact in their lives. And as you said, the certainty that we have around climate change is that the wet periods will be extremely wet, causing floods, and the dry periods will be extremely dry, causing drought. And we have to collectively have a discussion as a nation on what are the meaningful interventions we need to have to support our communities to be able to come out of that year.
Very good. Dr. Ari, thank you so very much for joining us tonight, and of course for spending almost 2 hours with us here and giving us your take on the ongoing situation in Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
Your time is highly appreciated.
Thank you.
I mean, I tell you what, drought is dehumanizing. Drought is debilitating. And of course, drought is degrading. We can't claim to move forward if some of our communities are hungry and dying of hunger. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. You have been watching a special coverage of the ongoing drought situation in Kenya. We're taking you to Betty Kiptum in Studio A for the wrap-up of the show. Thank you. Have a good night. Back to you, Betty Kiptum.
Thank you, O'Brien Kimani, and of course, thank you for that interview with the Secretary General in charge of the Kenya Red Cross, just giving us an overview of the solutions that we can put in place to ensure that the drought is managed and the impacts of climate change